Science Not Fiction is the 10th full-length album from London, England-based stoner metal band, heavy metal band, hard rock band, Orange Goblin, a quartet that has been around since the mid-90s. They were originally known under a different name, and they played melodic death doom metal. They were kind of influenced by the Peaceville sound at the time, and now they're on Peaceville after so many years with their same old sound. Nowadays, they prefer to be called a heavy metal band, but this group, they are basically known, from my point of view, in the late '90s. If you saw an advertisement for Fu Manchu, it was the same. It was in the same magazine that was selling the latest Trouble album, probably in 1995 or so. And you're probably listening to Monster Magnet if you like that as well. And there's plenty of other bands that I could go on about from that era. But there's a limited number of groups that were doing this well in the late '90s and becoming known for it. And Orange Goblin was one of the better exports from the UK at the time, and one of the few from Europe that was really doing something special outside of Sweden. This sound is, it's a little bit of biker rock, it's a little bit of '70s heavy metal, it's a little bit of a heavy psychedelic rock touch to it, but also there is the classic Sabbath groove to it. So the appeal to me was I was looking for music. The same way I discovered Fu Manchu and Trouble was I was looking for music related to Black Sabbath, looking for the Sabbath groove, looking for that classic sound, and '70s heavy metal in general. Doom metal was my interest, and what I got here was one of a few bands that introduced me to stoner metal, and mostly Cathedral did a better job. It kind of connected with me more, but this band was very much related. They were on Lee Dorian's label, and he was certainly pushing them for their first three or so records. So they're known for those first three records. I can't recommend them enough. I think The Big Black is their finest record. The first three are all very solid, and if you're a fan of this type of music and you appreciate where stoner doom metal went beyond 2000, definitely pick them up as almost a contemporary to something like Electric Wizard before they changed their sound to something a little bit more extreme in terms of its sound design. This has always been more of a rock band, and this is very much a rock record. So I'll put all this back into context after we listen to a song here, and it'll all make a bit more sense once you've heard it.
We're all born with a ticket for a one-way ride. Spitting fire at the stars until the planets collide. We're all waiting for the unit.
So somewhere along the way, Orange Goblin kind of lost their way in terms of my interest. They moved on to more of a Motorhead influenced sound. They tried more dramatic and performative things on their records for Candlelight Records. It all was not very good. They came back to their more original sound back in about 2014, and from that point they've worked towards this. Now their 2018 record tried something more accessible. It tried something a little bit more varied, and they brought back the Sabbath groove to their sound, and that was a great start. And this finishes the thought by making a classic Orange Goblin record in the style of their late '90s and early 2000s stuff. They don't leave behind the punk that kind of introduced and the Motorhead sound that introduced in the early 2000s, but they've dialed it back to something that is a little bit more late '90s stoner metal in its sound, or stoner rock if you will. Same difference. So this record feels like it's just classic Orange Goblin in the sense of where they started, but they've changed who they are over time. They've obviously developed as individuals, and so while they are calling back to the most classic heavy rock and roll influenced sound of the band, they're singing about, with a lot of sense, with a lot of wise attitude, and from a point of view which is more level-headed than you would have ever expected from a band they were always kind of singing about partying, having a great time. So for a band that's always had a parity with a band with like Fu Manchu, they've brought it back to the old school in the same way that band has, with about a 50-minute record that is solid throughout. It gets a little dry at the end. The first 5 songs are all pretty class. They're all just great songs with a lot of different influences running throughout all of them, where we get the classic rock and roll, we get kind of a boogie rock song, we get a doom metal song in the middle, and it all works. But there's about 2 songs too many, and it becomes a little bit redundant towards the end for my taste. It's just a little bit overlong. Keep in mind, I would have complained about the same thing on 80% of their records overall. So that's a me gripe, and more so them just being Orange Goblin and doing a great job of it. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm not the biggest fan of stoner rock and stoner metal, but this is a band that's always counted because they always had that personality that was extra big, and now they have something to say that I think is worth hearing overall. So check it out for yourself, see if it's your kind of thing. It's a high recommendation for me, verging on moderately high, and see if that's your thing. Again, it releases tomorrow on July 19th, and read my review if you feel like it.